Tonight we kicked off the debate season at 7 p.m. with a debate featuring both sides of Amendment 73, a ballot measure that would increase education funding. If you missed it, go to cpt12.org. It's very informative. Since the ballot becomes official today, let's do a round on how the ballot issues may affect the general election here in Colorado. Patty, there are a lot of issues in the statewide ballot. The Denver ballot, which is also finalized, is even bigger. It's going to take people a long time to get through it. Will the ballot issues on all these in these different communities be the tail that wags the dog that is the general election?
Well, the ballot issues are certainly going to be responsible for adding to the opioid crisis, because you cannot look at those ballots without needing a painkiller. There are 13 measures on the Colorado ballot. They're all very confusing, except for maybe the one that says we should ban the use of the word slavery in the Constitution, but that didn't pass the last time it was up. All of them are tricky. When you talk about 73, that would amend the Constitution, which we all are concerned about. Every time that happens, it makes it hard to undo. And it's as complicated as 66 was, maybe worse. It's really tough to understand. And all of these are hard. You've got the transportation being pushed by Chamber of Commerce, countered by a transportation measure, Independence Institute. You have the fracking setback of 2,500 feet, countered by the property rights, the takings issue that's pushed by the Farm Bureau. So there's a side, they're not exact opposites either, so you really need to study through them. And while we're studying through all of them and deciding maybe you can really get behind one or really against another, which will urge people to vote, maybe they will also actually pay attention to the candidates, the many, many candidates running for public office in November.
Krista, speaking of all those candidates running in November, do you think any of those races will be swayed by their stances on all these ballot issues?
I think it's certainly possible. In fact, the people who put the initiatives on the ballot are aware that it drives votes one way or the other. I'm not a big fan of the initiative process. I think we have legislators for this reason. There's a lot, as Patty was saying, a lot of complications, a lot of costs, a lot of benefits. We actually hire people to weigh those out. They're called legislators. So hopefully, while folks are showing up for the ballot initiatives, they actually vote for the people who should be making those decisions.
Penn, as a former state legislator, you made a lot of decisions like this, but let me ask you about a general election, the political oxygen in the room. And what I mean by that is that there's only a certain amount of ad time, a certain amount of space in newspapers and websites and even Twitter feeds for everything. And at some point, if you have this huge ballot, there's not going to be enough room to talk about everything. Do you think something's going to slip through the cracks because we're not going to know much about it?
Yeah, I think most things will slip through the cracks. And I think, I like your analogy. There's only so much oxygen in the room. It gets taken up by all these issues and candidates. And I think what happens is people begin to ignore all of it on a massive level. They begin to ignore all of the TV commercials, except the really nasty ones that for some reason have some staying power. They tend to ignore all of the mailers. I watch people, when they get their mail, they get the mailers, half of it goes right in the trash. They never look at it. And when they get the ballot and they see how massive it is, you know, I believe that voters look for particular things they're interested in. They vote on those, and the rest of it, it's a crapshoot how they're going to vote. And when in doubt, they just vote no on everything else. And that's part of the problem we have. You know, the bigger issue, and this is a conversation for another day, is I do believe that Tabor has had a dramatic impact on how representative democracy works in Colorado. Because of Tabor, legislators have frankly gotten frightened of the initiative process, and because of the various, you know, voter requirements, so that a number of issues that legislators ought to be deciding, as Krista talked about, they punt on because they feel it's safer just to give it to the voters rather than make a tough decision themselves.
Ed, with the size of the ballot and the magnitude of the races, and the statewide races are a big deal, they bring in a lot of money themselves, should some of these ballot issues worry about getting enough face time?
I think they should, and I think they should worry about competing against each other, even in ways that Patty didn't point out there. She points out rightly that you have a tax hike for roads, and you have a non-tax hike, bond sale for roads. But I think in many ways the tax hike for roads that the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce is putting out there is also competing against the education tax hike. I mean, we as Coloradans haven't approved a statewide tax hike since 2004. before, and that was on cigarettes, don't forget. So are we really going to be in the mood to approve 2 of them this year? Or are people going to go to the ballot and say, what do I care more about, education or roads? I mean, and frankly, if they have to decide between the 2, they're both going to fail. I think these ballot initiatives really need to worry about getting out there. I think that the down ballot candidates need to step up their games too. If you are running for AG or Treasurer or Secretary of State and you don't want to just be voted on as the, oh, am I voting for a D or an R, then you ought to really work to get your message out there, because otherwise people are going to forget you're even on the ballot until you show up this year. I do worry, as everyone's mentioned, about voters being fatigued and not digging into these issues enough. But that happens every 2 years, and yet somehow we still have representative democracy.